Welcome to the Backyard Professor podcast series, coming at you from the beautiful Rocky Mountains of Idaho. I'm Kerry Schertz, the Backyard Professor. It's very gratifying to me to have so many responses, so many positive responses to my podcasts for this last couple of weeks. And I can assure you I have an enormous amount of information to share in podcasts. It's a lot of fun to produce these podcasts, and there are just umpteen tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of books that I can scour to gather more interesting listening for my listeners' benefits. I can assure you I can't live long enough to share all the information I've gathered through 45 years of life on this earth yet. But I can also assure you that I'm sure going to give it my best shot trying. I can foresee me making thousands of these podcasts. They're a delight and a lot of fun to gather several dozen sources together and come up with new and interesting, stimulating ideas and information for you to think about and understand. So I have put together a very special podcast as my way of saying thank you to my listeners for enjoying sharing with me what I'm learning. So let me start with a most stimulating text by two very dear friends of mine, LDS scholars David E. Bokovoy and LDS Hebraic and Ancient Near Eastern scholar John A. Tvedtnes. He says to pronounce it Tvedtnes. I've always called him Tvedtnes, and he hasn't been offended yet. So, John, I'm going to call you Tvedtnes. Interesting name, isn't it? This book of theirs is called Testaments, Links Between the Book of Mormon and the Hebrew Bible. This was published this is by Heritage, copyright 2003. It's a wonderful, stimulating little book. Each chapter is just 2 or 3 pages, and I just so enjoy this kind of book because it'll take you, 5-10 minutes to read a chapter, and then you can mull it over and think about it for the rest of the day. Well, chapter 24 particularly caught my eye about a year ago when I read this, and I vowed someday I'm going to do a write-up on this and expand their thought. And instead of doing a write-up, I'm going to do a podcast. I still might do a write-up as well. This is about woman wisdom in the Book of Mormon. Mosiah 8:20 is their lead text. How blind and impenetrable are the understandings of the children of men, for they will not seek wisdom, neither do they desire that she should rule over them. Now, I pointed this verse out to my dear, dear friend Joe Steve Swick III on an email group that we belong to, the Mormon Mystic, and we both got together on the phone and just howled with laughter over this because we both study the wisdom tradition quite extensively, and Joe has a phenomenal capability of tying together loose strands that I wouldn't even think of, and so I got one up on him on this one, and we just howled with delight on this. It's very delightful to see two very fine LDS scholars, Bokovoy and Tvedtnes, discuss this lady wisdom in the Book of Mormon. I think the Book of Mormon scholarship is maturing. It has been now for decades. Well, Crimon and B.H. Roberts, back in the early turn of the last century, extensively analyzed the Book of Mormon, and that has caused no small controversy. Very interesting materials there. Someday I'll do a podcast on B.H. Roberts and the Book of Mormon, too. Well, Bokovoy and Tvedtnes. In the Book of Proverbs, the quality of wisdom appears as a woman who associates with the world of humans. The Hebrew sages personified wisdom in their writings as an exalted female figure who called out to men with great words of sagacity and prudence. Wisdom crieth without. She uttereth her voice in the streets. She crieth in the chief places of concourse, in the openings of the gates. Proverbs 1:20-21. This represents a common literary tradition of personifying the attribute of wisdom in ancient literature, and boy, they are right on this. They're exact. I'm going to flesh out their discussion. Their discussion is only 2 pages, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have about 20 sources here I want to get to, so this is going to take quite some doing. Well, they note that personification works well in Hebrew, and boy, does it ever. It works excellent in Aramaic also, but the Zohar just is electrifying on this principle of personification. But it does work well in Hebrew. And this language has both masculine and feminine nouns, which indeed it does. The Hebrew word for wisdom is chokhmah. Chokhmah is a feminine noun. This allows the personification of wisdom as a female to serve as an especially pointed metaphor. As such, Israelite males were counseled to seek wisdom, for her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. Proverbs 3:17. Also, the book of Proverbs instructs males to get wisdom. Forsake her not, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Proverbs 4, 5, and 6. Yet these illustrations of woman wisdom from the Old Testament are not the only examples of this phenomena, and they're right there too, not by any means. I've gathered several dozen I'm going to share with you today. The identification of wisdom as a female entity in two recently discovered papyrus leaves from Elephantine Egypt reveals that Semitic people proliferated this ancient tradition as early as the 5th century BC. I've got some materials on Margaret Barker that shows it goes earlier than that. This is on page 155 of Bokovoy and Tvedtnes' text. From heaven the peoples are favored. Wisdom, chokhmah, is of the gods. Indeed, she is precious to the gods. Her kingdom is eternal. She has been established by Shamayin. Yes, the Holy Lord has exalted her. These examples of the personification of wisdom as a female figure prove significant in the Book of Mormon research. In his poetic praise of thanksgiving, King Limhi used wisdom in a context that parallels the ancient tradition of personifying this attribute as a female figure. Again, they quote Mosiah 8:20, "How blind and impenetrable are the understandings of the children of men, for they will not seek wisdom, neither do they desire that she should rule over them." A careful reading of this passage suggests that King Limhi used personification in his reference to the attribute of wisdom. It's very nice to see the LDS scholars begin to recognize this wisdom tradition in the Book of Mormon. Now, there are several key symbolisms associated with Lady Wisdom, and there are some other LDS scholars that I'll go more into depth with this wisdom principle. But there are several key symbolisms that are associated with wisdom that I simply have to get with you to share with you. And one of these is the number 7. A most significant number, which I want to explore with you, mostly from the mystical traditions. Now, the thing I love about this number 7, the thing I love to do most of all, is when scholarship on the LDS scriptures, whether it be the Book of Abraham, the Book of Moses, the Joseph Smith translation, the Hebrew Bible, the Greek New Testament, the Book of Mormon, whichever book of scripture, I love it when scholars will find something significant, really interesting, a telltale sign of genuine authenticity, and then another LDS scholar over here thinking on something completely different finds something else, and I can come along and put it together in a synthesis. So far as I know, this has never been synthesized together in the Book of Mormon by LDS scholarship, so perhaps maybe I'm the first to put some very nifty discoveries together to show further the impact and the importance of this ancient wisdom tradition involved in the Book of Mormon in one of the most unique and subtle ways that I have ever seen, and I want to share that with you. In the text, Re-Exploring the Book of Mormon, edited by John Welch, A Decade of New Research, this was published by Farms back in the, let me see if I can find the publication date, 1992, by Deseret Book also, discusses the 7 tribes and aspect of Lehi's legacy. The descendants of Lehi's party consistently divided themselves into 7 tribes. Now, 3 different times in the Book of Mormon, these 7 tribes are mentioned, each time in the rigid order